Normally a YouTuber would say I didn't want to make this video, but I actually did want to make this video. I've been wanting to make it since my channel began. The old Just a Robot account, if not before. It's my struggle with suicide. I wanted to talk about it, but I was waiting for the right time. Even now, I'm a little bit scared to make this video. I'm afraid some people might use it against me. But because of recent developments, along with the pandemic going on and people feeling suicidal themselves, I think if I don't make it now, I'm never going to. Funny thing is, I used to mock people who were suicidal before I went through it myself. I used to say things like, "Suicide's the coward's way out. They don't think of the people they're leaving behind. They're so pathetic for not going on." But then I was suicidal myself and I finally understood what a lot of these people are going through. I want to make this clear, this was over 5, almost 6 years ago, so I'm doing fine now. I don't want pity from anyone. It's rarely one thing that makes someone finally want to commit suicide, and it's hard for people to believe others when they say they're suicidal because there's so many fakes nowadays. So I need to tell you a little bit about my life before I get to why I became suicidal in the first place. I was born into an extremely religious household. My mother was a super hardcore Christian. So hardcore, it's the only aspect of her personality. Every time she calls me or texts me, it's always about the Bible. And my dad was a lot like Hank Hill, but he had even less personality somehow. My parents forced me to be homeschooled. They didn't get me vaccinated so I couldn't run away and go to school, because after all, schools only let you in if you're vaccinated, at least as far as I'm aware. I'm an introvert now, but I definitely wanted to be an outrovert. But thanks to my parents keeping me isolated for so long, it took a toll on my mental health. I ignored it at first. I thought, aw, come on, everybody feels this way. I'm nothing special, I just gotta deal with it. But now, thanks to the pandemic, all these people around the world have been isolated and a lot of them are feeling suicidal because of it. I wasn't isolated for a few months, I was isolated for several years, so imagine what toll that took on me. Now, my parents were extremely conservative. They had a very conservative view on women, very conservative view on men, and they were extremely homophobic, along with all the other conservative Christian stereotypes. This wouldn't have been so bad, for me at least, if I grew up in a place like Texas or another conservative state, but they raised me in the most liberal state there is, California. And my mother encouraged me to walk up to people and preach to them about the Lord, even if they were Christian themselves, but they weren't her type of Christians, the Paul type of Christians, so therefore they weren't real Christians. Oh, and if you're wondering, my mother started her own church in the house I grew up in, because none of the churches she went to were aligned with her views. I was a little creeped out about how some of the Christian kids act, how the Sunday school teacher would have a demonic smile on her face and say, "Kids, who created the world?" And the kids with their dead-eyed, robotic-like faces would say, "God." And the teacher would smile demonically and say, "Yes, that's right." I'm gonna be honest here, I grew up in a straight-up cult. I was a little bit more rebellious than the average Christian kid. I would question several things about the Bible and stuff they taught us about America being a perfect country. For example, they would say things like, "America is the greatest country on God's green earth." And I would say, doesn't every country teach their kids that they're the greatest country on earth? I mean, if we were in England or Japan, wouldn't they be saying, England is the greatest country on earth, or Japan is the greatest country on earth? Just asking. Don't get me wrong, I'm not an anti-American. I do love America, but they loved it a hell of a lot more than I did. Needless to say, this caused me to be isolated from a lot of the hardcore Christian kids, and I ended up in a group of friends of softcore Christians. But I was kind of the Meg of the group. A lot of them were more functional members of society than me. Either A, because they weren't homeschooled, or B, they were homeschooled, but not homeschooled by a family like mine. I just thought the way people would treat me poorly in my group of friends, on a baseball team, football team, soccer team, or in Boy Scouts, that it was all just in my head. Everyone goes through this, I'm just being a negative Nancy. Everyone has a few people who are mean to them, and I have a few good friends. Maybe I'm mean to people, I just don't realize it. This was bubbling in my head for years and years and years, but it all came to a head when I finally got out of my mother's shadow and started entering the real world and going to a really liberal college. This was before I knew about the whole SJW, Black Lives Matter stuff. And this was back in 2013 or something, right when it started, and California was ground zero. I thought I was going insane. The things these people believed or fell for, or how freakishly angry they would get if you tried to have a discussion, just made me feel so confused. They were so crazy, but they all said I was the crazy one. And I started to think, am I nuts? Am I the horrible one? There are all these Christian conservatives who acted crazy, who believed the earth was flat, or that the sun revolved around the earth. But then you had these people who also believed in other crazy stuff, which, if you want to know what they believed in, you can watch my videos. And I thought these were my only two options, and if this was the entire world, I really didn't want to live in it. A lot of people like to make the joke, liberals get offended by anything, but I don't think people understand how far that goes. I remember I was in college trying to do some coding on a computer, and there was an Asian kid saying, "Hey guys, I'm gonna head out, I'm picking up my sister," and I said, "Alright, say hi to your sister for me." He paused, turned around, and started hopping while screaming, "What the fuck is wrong with you? You don't talk about other people's fucking families like that!" I offended someone by saying hi. Now, one of my friends told me maybe he thought you were trying to get with his sister, but I really don't see it. I don't see how saying hello means I want to bone you. And while I was in Texas, I didn't say hi to someone and they got super offended. So I can offend people by saying hi and not saying hi. It's a really doomed if you do, doomed if you don't situation. Now, today, I think that guy was stupid and crazy, but back then I thought I did something wrong. I always put others first before myself, and whenever someone got angry at me, I didn't think it was unjustified. I always thought I was the problem, and people took advantage of that. Combine that with our society where we always take the least charitable interpretation possible, and it really takes a toll on your mental health after a while. Now, I got so many more crazy stories of what I went through in this college, but I'm only gonna tell you guys one more. So Gerald, and I'm using his real name because he put me through a lot. Everyone else also put me through a lot, but if I use the real name of the other professors, people are gonna put 2 and 2 together and figure out what college I went to. So one day, Gerald walked up to me and said, "Hey, Jar, can you please stop hitting on this one girl? You're making her feel really uncomfortable." And I looked at him and said, "I have never hit on this girl. I barely talk to her. I don't even find her attractive. She looks like a little boy. She's flat-chested and she has short hair." He said, I know, it's just, you need to stop, please." And I said, "Alright, I'll stop talking to her. Let's never speak of this again." Okay. Later, one of the head professors, let's just call him Mr. Kane, called me into his office and said, "Char, I've been hearing you've been hitting on this girl, and she's tired of your advances. You need to stop, or I'm gonna get you expelled." I tried to explain the situation to him, but he was hearing none of it. 'Cause after all, I'm an evil, manipulative liar. I just agreed and walked out. I apologized to the girl if I made her feel uncomfortable, and she told me she doesn't know what I'm talking about, and she never told anyone I was hitting on her. Someone's lying in this situation, and it ain't me! So yeah, other people have to put up with girls falsely accusing them of sexual harassment or other stuff like that. I, on the other hand, have to deal with guys accusing me of it on behalf of women. But again, at the time, I thought I was at fault. I thought I was being delusional and thinking maybe I was hitting on her. I just didn't realize it. Because throughout my life, people would pull the whole "you never admit when you're wrong" card on me, and I used to think they were being genuine. Granted, I felt the same way about them, but I had a very low opinion of myself because of how much people would say it to me. In retrospect, I realized they were actually manipulating me, and they can try to pull the "you never admit when you're wrong" card as much as they want. But I am one of the very few YouTubers who will actually make videos going over my mistakes. Aside from me, there's Nostalgia Critic, who really doesn't do it anymore, Mr. Enter, at least from what I've heard, Armored Skeptic at least once, and Down the Rabbit Hole, who's an extreme perfectionist. And it is amazing how much people would project onto me, and they ended up the way they said I would end up, or they did the things they accused me of doing. Of course, I have proven this with T-Moss Boss, but a lot of people who said I would live with my parents until I was 30, well, I already moved out and a lot of them are still living with their parents. Some people said I would end up in jail or homeless, and a lot of them ended up that way themselves. And college professors accusing me of sexual harassment. The irony. College professors are well known for never molesting or hitting on female students. Now, of course, a few people who were mean to me went on to be successful, but most of them didn't. I can look back and laugh at it now, but this all contributed to me being suicidal. But everything I've told you wasn't what made me suicidal, it just contributed to it. Shortly after I left college, ironically it closed down just a few years after I left. Maybe if you didn't lie and harass people so often, more people would have joined your college and you guys would still be open. But enjoy living on the streets. You deserve it. Okay, back to being suicidal. After I left the college and I felt like I just didn't belong in the world, I decided to escape into the internet. But unfortunately, something far more worse than anything I ever had to deal with was waiting for me there. When I started my old persona on YouTube, it wasn't a persona, it was just me. But I was trying to be as nice to everyone as possible. I thought if I was the nicest guy ever, at least I'll find some group who will accept me. And eventually, I did come across a group who liked me. I even got to do a collab with a YouTuber I really liked. In real life, I got 2 part-time jobs and bought a used car that I still drive to this day. I remember I was driving home, and I looked up at the sky and smiled, and said to myself, you know what, I think my life is going to turn out pretty alright. Then one day I got into a fight with someone because they were implying I was into this little girl just because I was defending them a little bit. Basically calling me a pedo. I insulted them one time and they blocked me. I thought nothing of it at first, but slowly over time they started turning more and more people against me. They would tell people I did horrible things with pretty much no evidence whatsoever, and people would just believe them because after all, why would she lie? She had a group of friends and they would invite me to calls and record me without my permission. They would take things out of context to make me look horrible, but since I was such a nice guy, they had a hard time doing that. So if they made a video about me, they would make sure to take the least charitable interpretation possible. I've made references to this in my older videos and I really can't stand it. They said I sent people death threats even though I didn't. They said I used my mental disorder as an excuse for my behavior. And while I did use my dyslexia as an excuse for why I'm bad at spelling, dyslexia, at least as far as I know, doesn't change your behavior. But of course, they said I said it did. And let's just say something similar to the whole Spockter situation with Stories in Pentagram happened to me, but on a much smaller scale. They had basically no proof, but it didn't matter. When the mob mentality is against you, there's nothing you can do. People who I thought were my friends were spreading lies and rumors about me just for a little clout. They seemed to genuinely believe the things they said. I was eventually kicked out of the group, and I started to think to myself, maybe they're right. Maybe I'm just such a narcissist, I don't even know when I do something wrong. Over time, it just got to me. And I thought to myself, if I can't even make it in a group when I'm on my best behavior, how can I make it anywhere in life? Maybe the world would just be a better place if I deleted myself from existence. And I tried. I took a bunch of pills. Unfortunately, the ones I took were just placebo or baby aspirin. So yeah, I was such a failure I couldn't even kill myself right. Luckily for me, shortly after I ended up in a group called The Garden. It was a group that split off from the Facebook group The Cult of Dusty. And yes, they used to be big fans of The Cult of Dusty. I never got into him myself, but I did join the group. And I made some of the best friends I've ever had in that group. So good they stopped me from ending my existence. They helped me get started on my Just a Robot account, and they gave me the confidence to quit my old job and actually get a career started, and eventually I moved out of my parents' house. Of course, my life has a few of its ups and downs, but for the most part, I think my life is going uphill. Now I want to make this clear, I'm not upset because a bunch of people were making fun of me on the internet. It was because everything I went through in life, it just all piled up and finally came crashing down. I had a few people making fun of me on the internet before this group, and even now. And I even have people spreading lies and rumors about me. But these lies and rumors were far worse, and people were actually believing them, including myself. And that's what almost ended everything for me. If you want to know who exactly these people are, or what exactly they did to me, well, that video will be for next time. It took nearly 5 or 6 years, but I'm gonna finally clear the name of my old account. Or who knows, maybe I am guilty, but I've clearly changed. Now, for those of you who are watching this, and you're going through a really tough time in your life, and you don't know if you can go on any further, and especially for those people who are not just going through a tough time, but think things will never, ever get better, just keep going, because if you finally commit self-deletion, then all your suffering will have been for nothing. Don't let the world win, it's a dirty cheater. And having victory against someone who cheats is just all the more satisfying.